Grace Williams walked into Maplewood High School every morning with her head down. Her uniform, though neatly pressed, was second-hand. Her shoes bore the signs of years of use. But it wasn't the clothes that drew the whispers, it was her skin. Deep, rich, dark like polished ebony. "Look at her," Isabella Reed hissed to her clique as Grace passed by. "You'd think she rolled in charcoal." Laughter erupted in the hallway. Grace's stomach twisted. She tightened her grip on her books, her eyes burning. At home, her mother Linda wiped Grace's tears. "My daughter, your skin is a crown. Don't let them make you feel less." Grace forced a smile, but the pain sat heavy in her chest. The school courtyard bustled with students laughing, shouting, and sharing lunch. But at the farthest bench under the jacaranda tree sat Grace Williams, alone, as always. Her neatly packed lunchbox sat untouched. She ran her fingers along the metal edge of her chair, eyes fixed on the ground to avoid their stares. Every corridor, every classroom had become a battlefield. Isabella Reed and her clique were relentless. Today, they had pasted a cartoon drawing of a black charcoal stick on Grace's locker with her name scrawled underneath. She ripped it off quickly, but the laughter still echoed in her ears like a cruel song she couldn't shut off. Grace was brilliant, but brilliance didn't erase loneliness. She earned the highest marks in class, yet her achievements were met with rolling eyes and whispers. She was like a diamond buried under mud, unseen, unappreciated. Only one person broke the cycle of silence, Michael Carter. He was quiet but observant, with a gentle way of speaking that made Grace feel, for a moment, less invisible. He would hand her missed notes, stand beside her in the lunch line when no one else would, and sometimes even smile across the classroom to reassure her. But Grace had built tall walls around her heart. She barely spoke back, afraid that his kindness was just another setup for humiliation. One afternoon, after the final bell rang, Grace slipped out of class and headed to her sanctuary, the abandoned oak tree at the back of the school. The air smelled of wet soil after a light drizzle. She sat on the rough roots, her knees pulled to her chest. The sky was already painted in shades of amber and gray. "Why me?" she whispered into the wind. Her voice cracked as if the words themselves were too heavy to carry. She buried her face in her palms. Silent tears streaked her cheeks, mingling with the smell of rain and earth. She thought of her mother's encouraging words, but they felt far away, like fading echoes from a dream she once believed. The world seemed determined to convince her she was less than human. Unknown to her, Michael had followed at a distance, stopping at the edge of the field. He saw her small frame shaking under the tree, his heart clenching. He wanted to go to her, but his feet stayed rooted to the spot. Sometimes kindness felt like trespassing. At that moment, as Grace hugged herself tighter, she made a silent promise that one day she would be so much more than their whispers. She would be someone no laughter could crush. She didn't know it then, but the seeds of her transformation were being planted in those quiet tears under that lonely tree. Grace and her mother, Linda Williams, were still at their small roadside fruit stall long after most vendors had packed up. The wooden table sagged under the weight of ripe mangoes, pawpaws, and oranges. The smell of fresh fruit mixed with the thick scent of diesel from passing buses. Grace had tied her hair back with a faded scarf, her school uniform shirt still tucked neatly under a worn cardigan. She arranged the fruits quietly, her eyes following the slow trickle of customers. This was her after-school routine. No clubs, no hangouts, just straight to the stall to help her mother survive another day. Linda, strong but weary, adjusted the prices for a late customer. "My daughter," she said softly when the customer left, "you've worked all day. Go home and rest." "I'm fine, Mama," Grace murmured. Her eyes were focused, but inside she felt the ache of invisibility. Just then, the low hum of an approaching engine broke her thoughts. A sleek black car, tinted windows, shining rims, pulled up beside their stall. Grace's first instinct was to step back. Big cars meant big people. Big people rarely stopped here. The door opened and out stepped Dr. Benjamin Walker, a man whose very presence seemed to command the air around him. He was tall, silver-haired, dressed in a crisp navy suit that spoke of quiet wealth. He was in Maplewood for an outreach program but had decided to walk through the community himself. He was about to pass when something caught his eye. A blind old woman, tapping her cane along the cracked sidewalk, struggled to cross the street. Without hesitation, Grace dropped the bag of oranges she was holding and ran to the woman's side. "Mama, let me help you," she said, her voice steady but kind. She guided the woman across, shielding her from impatient drivers with her own small frame. Dr. Walker stood still, watching. There was no audience, no one to impress. Only a dark-skinned teenage girl acting out of instinctive compassion. When Grace returned to the stall, a strand of hair had escaped her scarf. She tucked it back quickly, embarrassed to find the stranger watching her. "You're remarkable," Dr. Walker said, stepping closer. His voice was deep, deliberate. "What's your name?" Grace hesitated. She wasn't used to adults addressing her with respect. Grace Williams." "And your mother?" Linda stepped forward, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "I'm Linda Williams. Sir, can we help you?" He smiled. "Actually, you already have." He reached into his pocket and handed Linda a business card embossed with gold lettering. "I run a foundation for gifted students. Your daughter, does she want to further her studies?" Grace blinked. The world seemed to pause, the honking of cars fading into a distant hum. She'd never been asked such a question, never imagined opportunity would find her on this cracked roadside. Linda clutched the card like a lifeline. "She's brilliant," she said quickly, pride trembling in her voice. Dr. Walker nodded. "Then she must apply. We're opening a new scholarship program. It's competitive, but something tells me she's exactly the kind of person we're looking for." Grace's heart pounded in her chest. The seed planted under that lonely oak tree earlier that week was already sprouting. She couldn't see it yet, but her life had just shifted on its axis. As the black car pulled away, she stared at the card in her mother's hand. It gleamed under the dying sunlight, as though holding a piece of her future. The scholarship news spread through Maplewood High like wildfire. For weeks, Grace had quietly filled out forms and written essays at night under a dim kerosene lamp while her mother dozed off beside her. It was the first time in her life she felt a door creak open to a future bigger than her street, her stall, her school uniform. But with the whisper of opportunity came the roar of envy. Isabella Reed heard it first from a teacher who was proud of Grace's progress. Within days, she and her clique had sharpened their mockery into knives. "Look at you, little Miss Scholarship," Isabella sneered one Monday morning. She leaned against Grace's locker, arms folded, her friends giggling like a chorus behind her. "You think going abroad will bleach your charcoal skin? Newsflash, they'll still laugh at you. Only this time in English accents." The hallway burst into laughter. Someone mimicked a British accent, shouting, "Excuse me, Miss Charcoal." Another student snapped a photo of Grace's stunned face and posted it online with cruel hashtags. Grace's throat closed. Her hands trembled as she stuffed her books into her bag. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but the words dissolved on her tongue. She felt herself shrinking, folding inward. At lunch, she sat alone, her food untouched. Her stomach was a knot of shame and anger. The scholarship application lay crumpled in her bag, the ink of her essays smudged with her tears. For a brief, dangerous moment she thought of tearing it up. That evening at home, she did just that. She sat on the floor and shredded the application papers. "They're right," she whispered to the empty room. "No matter where I go, I'll still be me." Her mother found her like that, hunched over, fragments of paper around her like fallen feathers. Linda knelt and gathered the torn sheets with trembling hands. "Grace," she said softly but firmly, "look at me." Grace lifted her tear-streaked face. "Your skin is not your shame. It's your story. Don't you ever let them write it for you." "But Mama," Grace's voice cracked. "What if I fail? What if they hate me there too?" Linda cupped her daughter's cheeks, her own eyes shining. "Failure is trying to be someone you're not. Success is standing in your truth and walking forward anyway. You are not running from them, Grace. You are rising." Those words cracked something open inside her. Grace wiped her eyes and looked at the shredded papers. They weren't dead yet. She could print new ones. She could write new essays. She could begin again. That night, she sat at the table while the crickets sang outside and rewrote every form, every essay. She worked until her fingers ached and her eyes blurred. But with every line, she felt herself pushing back against the voices that tried to shrink her. At dawn, she sealed the envelope. The air smelled of hope and paper and courage. Grace Williams was not giving up. The day Grace left Nigeria for London dawned heavy with rain. The sky, a dark grey canvas, mirrored the bittersweet ache in her heart. Her entire neighborhood lined the narrow street, some with admiration, others with envy. Grace clutched her small, worn suitcase, the same one her mother had used years ago when she first left her village to work in the city. Linda hugged her daughter tightly at the airport gate. "Never forget who you are, my child," she whispered into Grace's ear. "The world may try to tell you otherwise, but your skin is your crown." Grace swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "I'll make you proud, Mama." When she stepped onto the plane, Grace felt as though she was stepping into a new life. She had no idea how to navigate this new world, only the quiet fire inside her telling her she must. The cold air of London slapped her skin the moment she stepped off the plane. It wasn't just weather, it was a world apart. She was surrounded by pale faces, hurried footsteps, and unfamiliar accents. Her scholarship covered tuition and a small dorm room, but she still felt like an intruder in someone else's story. In the beginning, she faced fresh challenges. A classmate mocked her accent. Another stared too long at her skin, whispering behind her back. Some professors underestimated her abilities, assuming she'd struggle. The cafeteria food tasted like cardboard compared to her mother's cooking. But Grace refused to crumble this time. Every night she stood in front of the cracked mirror in her dorm room and repeated to herself, "I belong here. I am enough." Grace threw herself into her studies. She took extra courses in communication and leadership. She joined a student club for African diaspora students and found, for the first time, a community that celebrated her complexion instead of mocking it. She started learning about skincare tailored for dark skin and began a gentle routine. Her complexion glowed naturally. Her confidence grew to match it. But the true change came from within. She began giving small talks at the club about resilience and self-worth. People started recording her speeches, posting them online. The videos went viral among young women looking for someone who looked like them and spoke their pain into power. "The Ebony Queen," one caption read. Grace blushed when she saw it but didn't shy away. She was becoming the girl she had promised herself she would be under that oak tree. 2 years into her studies, Grace was invited to speak at a youth empowerment conference. The hall was packed with hundreds of students from across Europe. Her speech, raw, heartfelt, laced with personal struggle, drew a standing ovation. Journalists reached out. Brands began to notice her as a model for authentic dark-skinned beauty. She signed her first endorsement deal, which funded her mother's retirement from the roadside fruit stall. The first time Linda watched her daughter's face on a billboard in London, she wept into her hands. By the time her degree ceremony arrived, Grace was unrecognizable, not because of makeup or fame, but because of the fire in her eyes, the straightness of her spine, the confidence in her voice. She no longer hid her hands when she spoke, no longer kept her gaze down. The little girl mocked as charcoal had become a woman whose very presence commanded a room. And yet, in quiet moments, she still remembered the cracked concrete of Maplewood High, the cruel laughter, and the oak tree where she once cried. 6 years had passed since Grace Williams last stepped foot in Maplewood. 6 years of silence, headlines, and transformation. Now, she sat in the back seat of a sleek black limousine as it rolled past familiar streets. The same cracked sidewalks, the same peeling paint on the school walls, but everything looked smaller, dimmer. Outside the tinted windows, people craned their necks. The convoy alone was enough to draw whispers. 2 security SUVs flanked the limousine. Cameras flashed from every corner, and social media went into a frenzy. Grace Williams is back in town. The Ebony Queen returns to Maplewood High. Grace's heart thumped. Her palms felt clammy despite the air-conditioned coolness. She glanced at her reflection in the window, a woman in a tailored navy suit, her natural dark skin glowing under soft makeup, her hair in a regal updo. This was no longer the girl who hid under scarves. Beside her sat Michael Carter, now a journalist for a major news outlet, assigned to cover the event. He'd been the first person to stand by her at Maplewood High. Now he was holding a camera, capturing her arrival for the world to see. "Ready?" he asked softly. Grace inhaled deeply. "I've been ready for 6 years." Maplewood High had been polished for its 50th anniversary celebration. Bright banners fluttered from the gates, reading welcome alumni and special guests. But the real star was clear. Students wore T-shirts with Grace's face printed on them. Teachers rehearsed speeches. The principal rehearsed calling her name with perfect diction. Inside, Isabella Reed stood near the entrance in a faded dress, clutching a volunteer badge. Life had not been kind to her. The glamour she'd worn in school had dulled to exhaustion. Her once glossy hair hung limp, and her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the chairs. She'd heard Grace was coming, but she hadn't expected this. Then the motorcade rolled to a stop. The limousine door opened. A security officer stepped out first. Cameras clicked furiously. Then Grace emerged, her heels clicking softly on the pavement, her dark skin radiant under the late morning sun. A hush fell over the crowd, the kind of hush that belongs to history, not everyday life. She didn't wave dramatically. She simply stood tall, her eyes sweeping the crowd, a soft, genuine smile playing on her lips. Students gasped. Teachers whispered. "That's her?" One student breathed. "She's so beautiful," another whispered. Michael captured every second, his camera lens trembling. Grace walked through the gates flanked by event staff. As she passed, people instinctively stepped aside like a tide making way for a ship. Her eyes caught Isabella's for the first time in 6 years. The two women froze. Isabella's lips parted as though to speak, but no sound came out. Her eyes were wide, not just with shock but with something else, shame. Grace's smile didn't falter. She gave Isabella a small, polite nod before moving forward. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for something far larger. The main hall was decorated with gold and white balloons. A giant banner at the front read, "Keynote Speaker, Grace Williams, Global Advocate and Model." Grace mounted the stage, the room rising to its feet in applause. Students craned their necks, phones held high, recording every step. Teachers clapped, some with tears in their eyes. As the applause echoed, Grace caught sight of her mother in the front row. Linda wore a new lace gown, a gift from Grace, and tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Seeing her mother safe, healthy, and proud grounded Grace more than anything else could. The program had barely begun when Grace felt a presence at the edge of the stage. While the principal introduced her achievements, international model, youth advocate, entrepreneur, Grace's eyes drifted toward the far left corner of the hall. There, half hidden behind a cluster of chairs, stood Isabella Reed, fidgeting with her volunteer badge like a talisman. Grace felt a rush of memories. The laughter, the locker posters, the taunts about charcoal. Yet standing there now, Isabella looked nothing like the golden girl of Maplewood High. Her once flawless face bore fine lines. Her eyes darted nervously. Her posture was small. She looked human. After Grace's powerful keynote, a speech about self-worth, resilience, and the beauty of every shade, the audience erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Students cried. Teachers hugged each other. But Grace wasn't focused on the crowd. She was focused on the woman slipping quietly out the side door. She handed the microphone to the moderator and excused herself. Outside, under the school's ancient jacaranda tree, Isabella stood alone, her arms crossed tight across her chest, staring at the ground. "Isabella," Grace called softly. Isabella turned, startled. For a second she looked like a child caught doing something wrong. "Grace," she whispered. "I didn't think you'd." Grace stepped closer, her heels clicking on the pavement. She stopped just a few feet away, her posture calm but powerful. "You wanted to talk?" Isabella's throat bobbed. She dropped her gaze. I've rehearsed this 100 times, but now, the words won't come. Then don't rehearse, Grace said gently. Just speak. Isabella's eyes brimmed with tears. I was horrible to you. Every joke, every name, every whisper, I started it. I was jealous, Grace. I don't even know of what exactly. Maybe of how smart you were. Maybe of how strong. But instead of admiring you, I tried to destroy you. I'm so sorry. Grace let the silence stretch between them. The sound of distant cheers from the hall floated on the breeze. I used to dream of this moment, Grace said finally. But in my dreams, I was always angry. I thought I'd throw your words back at you, humiliate you the way you humiliated me. She exhaled slowly. But when I look at you now, I don't see the girl who mocked me. I see someone who was lost. Isabella's tears spilled over. I was lost, she whispered. And cruel. And blind. Grace stepped forward and took Isabella's trembling hands in hers. You don't owe me anything, Isabella. I forgave you long ago, for my own peace, not yours. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It transforms it. Isabella blinked in shock at the warmth of Grace's touch. I don't deserve. No, Grace said softly. You don't deserve forgiveness. None of us earn it. We choose it. And I'm choosing it because I refuse to be defined by what you did. Isabella's sob turned into a strange, relieved laugh. You're everything I wish I'd been. Grace smiled faintly. You still can be. Healing starts when we stop hurting others and ourselves. The school bell rang in the distance, as if punctuating their conversation. Grace released Isabella's hands, but not before giving them a final, gentle squeeze. I have to go back in, Grace said. They are waiting for me. Isabella wiped her eyes and nodded. Thank you, Grace. For everything. For not hating me. Grace turned toward the hall. I don't hate you, she said over her shoulder. I outgrew you. And with that, she walked back inside, taller than ever.